Good morning. Dzień dobry, panie ministrze. I will switch to English right away. Thank you very much for accepting to talk about these extremely difficult issues this morning. Let's start with Ukraine, because this is the most pressing security challenge Europe is facing now. We are now more than 3 years into this full-scale war. We have very unpredictable administration in Washington, D.C. We have European allies who have been very active since the beginning in their support of Ukraine, but have been sidelined by the Trump administration in its efforts to bring this to an end. These Europeans have made huge efforts and seem to be back in the game now. And now we have tomorrow, we don't know exactly what will happen. Maybe you know and you will tell us. In Istanbul, the Ukrainian president will be there. We don't know whether the Russian president will be there. Volodymyr Zelensky will meet probably with the Turkish president. The American president said he might be there. What is your sense of where we're going? Is there a chance of serious negotiations starting? Where do we stand on this issue of the ceasefire? And are we on the same page with the Americans?
Let's get to that, but let's first say what we do know about after these 3 years. So 3.5 years ago, we assumed, and Putin assumed, that Russia had a first-class army, second to the United States, that it was a major threat. And 3 years on, Putin is still fighting in Donbass. And actually, the war is more or less a draw. Russia lost the war over the Black Sea. Ukraine is exporting from Odessa through the Bosphorus. In the air, it's tit for tat. The Russians are bombing more using these glide bombs, but the Ukrainians are managing to make deep strikes at refineries, weapons factories with their own drones. And on the ground, Putin is making incremental gains at huge losses. These are Pyrrhic definitions of Pyrrhic victories. So Russia's intent has been shown to be worse than most people thought, but Russia's capacity is less. We also have learned that nuclear weapons are actually unusable. Because if Putin could have used them in some way to threaten or to end the war on his terms, he would have done it, but he hasn't. Now, coming to Istanbul, this is a test. The main impact of what happens or doesn't happen in Istanbul will be in Washington. President Trump, on assuming office, did what you do in games theory. You make a positive opening and you wait for the reaction of the other side. So he's made a number of concessions to Russia.
Quite big ones.
And nothing in return. And this is the last chance for Putin to choose what the Americans called an off-ramp.
Okay.
And I think that if Putin doesn't choose it, i.e. agrees, like Ukraine, to a ceasefire and serious talks, then President Trump is capable of changing his policy towards him. And what should help him in making that decision is the draft bill tabled by Senator Lindsey Graham, under which he has almost 80 signatures, which is to say the majority of Republican senators. And I think if Putin plays for time, this might be activated with serious consequences.
So when you say President Trump might change his mind, does that mean that he would give up any effort to try to end this war, to
Well, I hope he just comes round to the view that we in Europe have had all along, which is that you need to put pressure on Putin.
Yeah, but do you see an evolution in this? Because we, at the beginning, when he arrived, when he came back to office, it was quite a big shock to Europeans to see this American president realigning in a way with Vladimir Putin. We have a kind of softening of this position now. How do you see it?
Well, by their fruits you shall judge them. I think it was legitimate to try a new tack. I would have done it differently. I would have done it through secret diplomacy, yeah. And make it public only when you think you're close to success. President Trump has his own inimitable style. He gave it a chance, and I hope he sees that Putin is mocking him.
Okay. And what is the Europeans' leverage in this? How, I mean, there was this very big show of support for Ukraine over the weekend with your Prime Minister.
Well, it's not just show, it's real resources. We have contributed to Ukraine more than the United States, $164 billion at the latest count. And quite right, because it's cheaper to deter Putin in Ukraine than it would be on the EU border. We've helped a lot, both the EU and its member states, both financially and militarily.
So you were in Lviv last week with the 27 foreign minister.
Not quite.
26, right. Your prime minister was in Kiev with 3 other European leaders, including President Macron. But then we have to talk about the future. If we manage to get a ceasefire, what will the Europeans do? Because if Ukraine is not allowed to join NATO, which seems to be the case, how do you protect Ukraine?
Well, I was at the Bucharest NATO summit in 2008.
I know, yeah.
And guess which 2 countries blocked Ukraine from getting NATO membership?
Yeah.
And at the last NATO summit in Washington, so there was never an immediate prospect of Ukraine joining NATO. What is doable and achievable for Ukraine is European integration. And remember, the Lisbon Treaty has actually stronger, more explicit security guarantees than the Washington Treaty.
Do you see a possibility of European troops on the ground, as President Macron?
It won't be Polish troops, but Poland will be part.
Why not?
Because our role is to protect the flank of that operation.
You're going to have the biggest army in Europe.
We have 650 kilometers of border with Belarus and Russia. How much does France have?
Yeah, that's a good point.
So, and you know, the logistics of such an operation is a huge task. So you want to have secure lines of transport and communication, and this is Poland's role.
Very good. Talking about the US and transatlantic relationship, which has had its ups and downs, many downs, because I found an op-ed you wrote in 2003 in the Washington Post. It was called Europe, the New Europe Alone. And you were very bitter, you were very disappointed about the US because Central Europe had been involved, had fought along the US in the Iraqi war, in Afghanistan, and you said we are not getting anything in return. And I mean, this I think was a very good, because this is a country you know very well, the United States, and this I think is an illustration of these ups and downs that we have been having with America. Donald Tusk said also when Trump was elected, we shouldn't, the era of geopolitical outsourcing is over, right? Sorry, the era of geopolitical outsourcing is over. Now, isn't it time now to fix this relationship and for Europe to really build its own strength and, you know, its own path. I see that some European countries or leaders are now getting cold feet because we see some softening of the American attitude. J.D. Vance was the other day in Washington at an event organized by the Munich Security Conference, was much softer than he was in February when everybody was shocked in Munich by his aggressivity. How do you see this now? Is it a turning point now, finally, in this relationship?
My own view is that the United States has affairs in other parts of the world, but to us, they're married.
To us, they are?
They are married.
Oh, I see.
Okay.
But, but how good is this marriage going?
It's a marriage of a sensible marriage in which we need each other. Mm-hmm. In the area of trade, I bet you sooner or later we'll have a sensible deal. Mm-hmm. And if the United States wants to win its rivalry with China, it needs allies. Mm-hmm. And we are the best, most reliable, and most capable allies. And we need to get even more capable. Since President Trump's first term, we, non-US NATO allies, have doubled our defense spending. That's not nothing. Mm-hmm. From a low base, we need to do more. If we do that, if countries do half of what Poland is doing in proportion to GDP, we will not only be able to deter Putin on our own, we will gain respect in Washington. This is what needs to be done.
And that's your position. How you see your other European partners? They're not all as motivated as you are, or determined.
We all have financial constraints. Mm-hmm. Poland and Germany are the two larger economies in Europe that still have room on our credit cards to spend money on rearmament and on reindustrialization. Mm-hmm. Poland and Germany are at about 60% of debt to GDP ratio. Mm-hmm. Everybody else is over 100. Well, you know, over-borrowing in the past has consequences. But if demand is created in Germany for infrastructure spending and for rearmament, this should reignite the economy of all of the European Union.
This panel is called Europe's Moment, but there's a lot of talk at the moment about Poland's moment. Yeah? Poland is on the rise. I mean, you know this here, but outside, there's a kind of recognition, I think, now that you are going to play an important role, and you are playing an important role in Europe. How would you describe this role? I mean, you're an important actor with France and Germany. You're revitalizing this Weimar triangle now. What is Polish specificity? You mentioned this protection of the border. What is Poland today in Europe?
Well, the defense aspect is one thing. We now have the largest land army in the European Union. We have more tanks than Germany, France, and Britain together. And our defense budget is bigger than Turkey or Spain. And if you substituted the French nuclear component, you know, on conventional forces, it's comparable. And 52% of our defense budget is on procurement. Mm-hmm. So, you know, that gives us a certain position. But I think the Polish moment is partly a political one. We have given example to the rest of the Western world of how you beat populists. How you can get a sensible government that doesn't pick fights with everybody, that doesn't attack Europe and Western values, how you mobilize your people to make sensible choices. That's not nothing. I think we can teach you how to do it in many other countries.
I hope you don't have to teach us at some stage. have an important election on Sunday. I will not ask you who is your favorite candidate, of course, but there is another election.
I'm not shy. I think the mayor of Warsaw will win in the first round with 51% of the vote.
I can see where this room is going as well, yeah. There is another important election. It's in Romania. And the leading candidate there is nothing like Radosław Sikorski. He's a far-right candidate. He got 41% of the vote on the first round. And he is the exactly opposite of what your government and the German government, the French government fight for. What would be the impact, you think, of this if he wins? What will be the consequences for Europe?
Well, first of all, Romania has done really well in the last couple of decades. Romania is now richer than Hungary. Romania has important American bases. Romanians have done well in both NATO and European institutions. It's a serious country, and it would be a shame if it veered off that course. When the candidate announced the meddling in our electoral campaign yesterday, I rang our embassy in Bucharest, and they tell me he's more of a, the thing that people don't pick up on is that he's an irredentist. In other words, he appeals to this idea of changing borders and taking land away from neighboring countries. Now, that is completely unacceptable. And I hope Romania, I don't interfere in their elections, but I hope Romania stays within the, our European values and our European treaties.
Because that would be, we already have Hungary, which is a problem, as you mentioned earlier, in the functioning of the European Union.
Well, it's the blocking of anything to do with Ukraine and to do with European defense. But shockingly, Ukraine in the last few days announced that they've caught some Hungarian spies who were reconnoitering Transcarpathian Ruthenia for a possible Hungarian move there. If this is true, and I need to verify this, it would be outrageous.
Absolutely. And last question, in next month there's going to be a NATO summit in The Hague. Nobody knows what's going to happen at that summit. Some people don't even know whether whether the American president will show up. Do you think NATO will still exist next year?
Yes, it will. One of my laws of international politics is that every US administration learns Russia and Europe afresh. But I think by the time of the Hague summit, they will have learned.
But this is not a new administration. I mean, it's the second term of this administration, so it should know.
I'm confident that the NATO commitments will be confirmed, but it's us Europeans that have lagged behind. And we need to convince President Trump that we have heard, because he was right on this. And credit should be given where credit is due, that his appeals, his demands for greater defense spending have been heard, and then I hope he will give us the respect that we have earned.
And the time that we need probably to build these forces to compensate for American forces, if they... Do you think it's a possibility?
They are doing us a favor. They are telling us clearly and honestly that they have their rivalry with China and that defense of Europe should be mostly up to Europeans. They'll still provide the nuclear shield, they'll still provide the targeting intelligence data, but conventional deterrence of Russia is a job that Europeans are capable of doing.
Our time is up. In a few words, when you wrote that op-ed in 2003, could you imagine that we would be going through this time today, these challenging times from the US and from Russia?
Yes, we did. That's why Poland has had a super law that's been granting our military 2% of GDP for 20 years. Because we had a two-track policy. normalizing with Russia, but just in case, having an army worthy of its name, which is not what West Europeans did. So yes, we were worried about Russia, and unfortunately we've been vindicated.
Panie ministrze, bardzo dziękuję. Thank you very much.